My wife smirked when our son took her side in court. She thought I was the confused old man she had already outplayed. Then the judge started reading the email she thought no one would see. And suddenly, it wasn't my mind on trial. It was her. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Raymond. I'm 68 years old. And this is what really happened. The bailiff said, "All rise," and my knees answered before my pride did. The judge didn't look up right away. He just slid a paper from the top of the stack and read, "Slow and clean." Once he signs the retirement rollover, he won't notice the deed change. My wife's mouth held a smirk for half a second longer. Then it stopped working. I watched my son's jaw tighten like he'd bitten down on a nail, and he still wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the seal on the wall, like the eagle could forgive him. That sentence wasn't supposed to exist in this room. It wasn't supposed to have ink. It was supposed to stay buried in somebody's inbox. But there it was, in the hands of a county judge, under fluorescent lights that never blinked. 30 minutes earlier, my wife looked unbreakable. Polished hair, pearls at her throat, a soft blue blazer that told the court she was steady. She sat at the petitioner's table like it belonged to her, shoulders relaxed, fingers laced. She didn't glance at me once, not until my son walked in and took the seat behind her. He's 38. A project manager with a mortgage and a golden retriever. I used to brag about him at the diner on First Avenue, like his paycheck proved I'd done something right. That morning, he looked older than me. The benches scraped as people shifted to get comfortable. Wood against wood. A sound you don't forget when you're the one being measured. The air smelled like old paper, hand sanitizer, and burnt coffee from the vending machine. Somewhere down the hallway, a copier kept clicking, steady and indifferent. It felt like the building itself had a pulse, and none of it belonged to me. My attorney, Janet Mills, leaned toward me. Her voice stayed low, trained for rooms that punish volume. "Janet, Ray, don't react to anything. Let them talk." Me, "He's really doing this?" Janet, "He thinks he's protecting his mother. That's all he thinks." Across the aisle, my wife's attorney, Brad Klein, set a leather binder on the table. He tapped it twice like a man knocking on a door he already owned. My wife's smirk returned, small and private, meant only for me. We were in Polk County Family Court, downtown Des Moines. Not a TV courtroom. No camera glare. Just beige walls, a faded flag, and the kind of order that makes your mistakes feel permanent. My wife, Ellen, filed for divorce after 41 years. She filed for equitable distribution, like the marriage was a business that needed liquidation. She wanted the house. She wanted half my pension. She wanted my IRA. Because I never managed it right, she said. And she wanted our son to say it out loud. I carried a manila folder in my lap, edges worn from my grip. Inside were copies of bank statements, a property tax bill, and a notarized affidavit I'd signed last week at a UPS store on University Avenue. The stamp was still sharp. County Court Record Number 2025-CV-11873, signed by Notary Public L. Hernandez. It felt like armor made of paper. Brad stood first. He didn't look at me either. He looked at the judge like they were old classmates. "Brad, Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter. Mrs. Whitaker is seeking stability." He said stability like it was a product on a shelf. Then he turned his head and nodded toward my son. "Brad, we have a witness prepared to speak to Mr. Whitaker's financial behavior." My son stood. His suit was new, the tag probably still in the pocket. He adjusted the cuff like he'd seen it done on a show. Son. I'm Daniel Whitaker. I'm the party's adult son. He swallowed and kept his eyes forward. Son. I'm here because I'm worried about my mom. That last word hit harder than any accusation. Not because I didn't worry about her too, but because I'd stopped counting my own worry as something that mattered. He talked about my retirement account. He talked about me taking risks. He said I'd been confused after my surgery last fall. He made it sound like I wandered through life leaving receipts in my wake. The truth was uglier and smaller. I'd had a knee replacement. I'd been home for 6 weeks. Ellen handled the mail to help. She told me not to stress about paperwork. She told me she'd already spoken to someone at the bank. I listened to my son repeat her lines in his own voice. He didn't know they were borrowed. He thought they were his. My wife didn't interrupt him. She didn't need to. Her hand rested on the table beside a Starbucks cup. The green logo turned outward like a charm. Every so often she'd glance at me and lift one eyebrow, like I should be ashamed for still breathing. Janet took notes without emotion. Her pen moved in tight loops. When Daniel said, "Dad can't keep track," Janet's pen paused. Just once. Then it kept going. The judge asked Daniel a few questions. Short ones, neutral ones. Where I worked, when I retired, who paid the bills. Daniel answered like a fawn reading from a script he trusted. Judge Harmon had a tired face and a careful voice. He'd seen 1,000 families unthread in this same room. He wasn't here to punish feelings. He was here to label property. When Daniel finished, he sat down behind Ellen, not behind me, behind her. That's when Ellen's smirk got bold. It slid across her face like she'd won something small and satisfying. A private joke at my expense. I wanted to stand. I wanted to say, "Danny, well, remember who carried you through the blizzard of '93? I wanted to remind him who taught him to change a tire in the Walmart parking lot off Fleur Drive. But the court doesn't care about blizzards. It cares about documents. So I stayed still. I held my folder. I stared at the judge's bench and counted the screws in the wood. Janet rose when it was our turn. She didn't paint me as a saint. She didn't beg. She did what good lawyers do. She asked for facts. Janet. Mr. Whitaker's retirement accounts are documented. The household expenses are documented. She placed copies on the table. Janet. There are irregular transfers that began before the petition was filed. Brad objected. Quick, confident. Brad. Relevance. Speculation. Judge Harmon. Overruled. Continue. Ellen's smile thinned. Not gone yet. Just narrowed. So Janet kept her voice even. Janet. Your Honor, we also have concerns about an attempt to alter beneficiary designations and property interests. She didn't look at Ellen when she said it. She looked at the judge. Judge Harmon's eyes finally lifted toward me. Not soft, not cruel, just assessing. Judge Harmon. Mr. Whitaker, do you have anything you want to add before I review the submitted exhibits? I opened my mouth and tasted the dryness of fear. I thought of my son's averted eyes. I thought of Ellen's pearls. I thought of how she'd told me, smiling, "Just sign here so we can simplify things." Janet's hand brushed my sleeve, a quiet reminder. Stay steady. Judge Harmon tapped the stack of papers once, squaring them. His gaze moved from Janet to Brad to Ellen, then to my son. Judge Harmon. Before I proceed, is there any additional evidence either party wishes to submit today? Judge Harmon. Before I proceed, is there any additional evidence either party wishes to submit today? Brad Klein didn't hesitate. He stood like he'd been waiting for that cue all morning. Brad. Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to submit a summary of Mr. Whitaker's recent transactions. He held up a packet, clipped clean, tabs already labeled. When he walked it to the clerk, I caught the sharp scent of his cologne. Expensive. Spicy. The kind you buy when you want a room to remember you. Ellen leaned back and crossed her ankles. Her heel tapped once on the floor, soft but smug. The smell of her perfume reached me next, powdery and floral. Same brand she wore on our anniversary dinners, back when she still touched my arm in public. Daniel's chair creaked as he adjusted behind her. He kept his hands folded, like he was in church. His breath carried peppermint, gum or mints, something to calm nerves. It made me think of long drives when he was a kid, him asking for gas station candy at every exit. Janet didn't move. She watched Brad's packet like it was a magician's sleeve. Janet. Your Honor, we object to any summary that isn't backed by primary records. Brad. The primary records are available. This is for the court's convenience. Judge Harmon. I'll admit it for now. Weight is another matter. Brad returned to his table with a smooth smile. He didn't look at me. He looked at Ellen, as if to say, see? Easy. Then he turned, just slightly, toward Daniel. Brad. Mr. Whitaker's son can also clarify why these transactions are concerning. Daniel rose again. Oh, slow this time. He cleared his throat, and the microphone caught the tiny rasp. Nervous. Human. Daniel. Dad, he moved money after his surgery. He said moved, like I'd carried cash in a shoebox across state lines. Daniel. He wasn't himself. He forgot things. Mom had to step in. Ellen's smirk didn't return. She didn't need it. She had a witness who shared my last name. I stared at the packet Brad had submitted and tried to picture it. A story built out of numbers. A story where I was the problem and Ellen was the solution. Janet stood for cross. She didn't rush Daniel. She didn't raise her voice. She asked the kind of questions that feel harmless until they start stacking. Janet. Daniel. How often did you visit your father during his recovery? Daniel. Maybe twice a week. Janet. Where did you sit when you visited? Daniel frowned. Daniel. In the living room, or the kitchen. Janet. Did you see your father pay bills, balance accounts, talk to his bank? Daniel. No. Janet. So your knowledge of his finances comes from… Daniel glanced at Ellen. Not long. Just a quick flick of the eyes, like a habit. Daniel. From Mom, and from what I saw in messages. Ellen's fingers tightened around her Starbucks cup. The plastic lid squeaked under her grip. A sweet, burnt smell lifted as she shifted it. Coffee that had been sitting too long. Janet. What messages, Daniel? Daniel. Screenshots. Emails. Janet. Who provided them? Daniel's cheeks colored. Daniel. Mom did. Brad objected again, quick and sharp. Oh, Brad. Relevance. This is about distribution, not family dynamics. Janet. It's about credibility, Your Honor. Judge Harmon. Overruled. Answer the question. Daniel swallowed. The smell of peppermint got stronger for a second, like he'd bitten down on another mint. Daniel. Mom showed me what Dad sent. And what the bank sent. Janet. Did you ever see the full email threads? Daniel. No, just the parts that mattered. Janet. Parts that mattered to whom, Daniel? Daniel's eyes finally moved toward me. Not fully. More like he looked at the space beside my shoulder. Daniel. To Mom. To all of us. I felt heat in my ears, not rage, something older, a grief that smells like dust and old carpet, the kind of grief you find in basements where boxes haven't been opened in years. Judge Harmon lifted a hand. Judge Harmon. Mr. Whitaker, you may remain seated. Ms. Mills, proceed. Janet nodded. Then she turned the knife without letting Daniel see it coming. Janet. Daniel, are you aware your mother visited a notary public on November 18th, 2025? Brad. Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. Janet. I can lay foundation. Judge Harmon. Lay it. Janet reached into her own folder and placed a single page on the clerk's tray. I could see the inked stamp from where I sat. UPS store, notary seal, date, signature. Janet. This is a notarized change request for beneficiary designation on Mr. Whitaker's IRA. She spoke as if reading a grocery list. Janet. The signer is Ellen Whitaker. Brad. Your Honor, that document. Judge Harmon. Mr. Klein, you'll have your turn. Ellen's perfume turned sharp in my memory. It wasn't romantic anymore. It was chemical, not like hairspray in a closed bathroom. Daniel leaned forward, squinting at the page. He looked confused, not angry. He wasn't part of this step. He hadn't been told. Daniel. Mom, what is that? Ellen didn't answer him. She kept her gaze on the judge, chin lifted. Ellen. It's a routine update. We were organizing things. Janet. Without Mr. Whitaker's knowledge? Ellen. He was recovering. I handled paperwork. Janet. You handled his retirement beneficiary. Ellen. I was his wife. Janet let it hang there, heavy but controlled. Then she asked the question that made the courtroom feel smaller. Janet. Who was the new beneficiary, Mrs. Whitaker? Brad. Objection. Confidential financial. Judge Harmon. Overruled. Answer. Ellen's lips parted. She inhaled, slow. I smelled mint, coffee, and that powdery perfume all at once. Like the air itself was tense. Ellen, our son. Daniel blinked hard. He looked at me then, directly, like he'd finally recognized the man in the chair. Daniel. Dad. I didn't. Janet. Daniel. Did you ask your mother to do that? Daniel. No. Janet. Did your father ask you to do that? Daniel. No. Janet. So you would have learned about it when? Daniel's voice dropped. Daniel. I guess I wouldn't have. Brad stepped in fast. Brad. Your Honor, this is becoming emotional theater. Janet. No, this is a paper trail. Judge Harmon leaned back. His chair let out a tired groan. He rubbed the bridge of his nose like he could smell the trouble too. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, why was your adult son designated without your husband's signature? Ellen's jaw flexed. Not Ellen. Because my husband wasn't reliable. Judge Harmon. Reliability isn't the standard for altering ownership interests. That line landed like a gavel without the sound. Even Daniel heard it. Brad tried to recover the narrative. He pointed at his packet again. Brad. Your Honor, regardless, Mr. Whitaker's spending. Judge Harmon lifted his palm. Judge Harmon, I haven't reached spending yet. I'm on intent. Intent. That word smelled like metal, cold and official, the kind of word that turns a marriage into a case number. Janet sat down, not triumphant, just ready. I stayed still, hands on my folder, but inside something steadied, not hope, not joy. A quiet certainty that Ellen had stepped on a loose board. Judge Harmon looked at the clerk. Judge Harmon, pull the submitted digital exhibits. I want the email communications. Judge Harmon, pull the submitted digital exhibits. I want the email communications. The clerk's keyboard began to click, sharp, precise. Each tap sounded like a small hammer striking glass. A monitor on the side wall flickered awake. The light shifted in the courtroom, pale blue washing over beige walls. Ellen's pearls caught that glow and reflected it back, cold and hard. Brad leaned toward her, whispering fast. His voice carried a faint edge now. Not panic, not yet, but something tighter than confidence. Janet didn't whisper. She simply folded her hands and watched the screen. I felt the smooth edge of the wooden bench under my palm, polished by decades of strangers waiting for verdicts. It was cool and steady, more reliable than the woman sitting 10 feet away from me. The clerk cleared her throat. Clerk, Your Honor, these are the email threads submitted by both parties. Judge Harmon nodded. Judge Harmon, let's begin with Exhibit D, November correspondence. The screen filled with text, black font, white background, ordinary, innocent-looking. Ellen exhaled through her nose, a slow, controlled breath. She still believed she knew what was coming. The judge adjusted his glasses and began to scroll. Most of it was harmless. Bank confirmations, appointment reminders, a message from me asking Ellen if she'd paid the gas bill. Then his scrolling stopped. He leaned closer to the screen. Judge Harmon, this message is dated October 3rd. Subject line, next steps. Brad shifted in his seat. A subtle movement, but enough. Judge Harmon began to read silently first. His brow creased. Then he spoke. And Judge Harmon, Mrs. Whitaker, is this your email address? Ellen's voice remained even. Ellen, yes, Your Honor. Judge Harmon, and this is addressed to Mr. Klein's office? Brad stood quickly. Brad, Your Honor, that appears to be privileged communication. Janet rose as well. Janet, the email was forwarded outside counsel's office. It's no longer privileged. Brad's jaw tightened. Judge Harmon held up a hand. Judge Harmon, sit. I'm determining scope. The air felt thinner now, like someone had opened a freezer door in winter. Daniel leaned forward again. He wasn't blinking as much. Judge Harmon read the first line aloud. Judge Harmon, once he signs the retirement rollover, we can secure the house before he understands the numbers. Ellen's back stiffened. Brad, Your Honor. Oh, context matters. Judge Harmon continued reading, voice calm. Judge Harmon, I've already spoken to Danny. He agrees Dad isn't thinking clearly. Daniel's breath caught. Not dramatic. Just a sharp intake that didn't fully release. I didn't move. I didn't look at him. Judge Harmon, if we present it as protection, The court will side with stability. The fluorescent lights hummed louder in my ears. Or maybe I was just hearing them now. Ellen's fingers tightened around her bracelet. The pearls clicked softly against one another. A nervous sound she probably didn't realize she was making. Brad tried again. Brad. Your Honor, strategic discussions in preparation for litigation are not evidence of wrongdoing. Janet didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, 'cause Janet, planning to mislead the court about mental capacity is... That word hung in the air. Capacity. Judge Harmon scrolled further. Judge Harmon. Here, this line. He adjusted his glasses again. Judge Harmon. He won't see it coming. He never reads the fine print. Ellen's face lost color. Not dramatically. Just enough that her foundation couldn't hide it. Daniel turned toward her. Daniel. Mom. What is this? She didn't answer him. She looked straight ahead, jaw set. Judge Harmon continued. Judge Harmon. Our son will back me up. He trusts me. That's enough. Daniel sat back slowly. His chair creaked under the shift. For the first time that morning, Ellen looked uncertain. Not scared, not broken, just calculating. Judge Harmon stopped reading. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, were these statements accurate at the time you wrote them? Ellen's throat moved as she swallowed. Ellen. They were taken out of context. Judge Harmon. Explain the context. Brad stepped forward again. Brad. Your Honor, this was a private marital dispute. Emotions run high. Judge Harmon. This is a court of law, Mr. Klein. I'm asking about intent. Intent again. I felt something settle inside me, a long-held breath easing out. Daniel looked at the screen, then at me. Not past me, not around me, at me. His eyes weren't angry. They were confused, like someone realizing the map he'd been following was drawn by only one hand. Judge Harmon leaned back in his chair. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, this email predates the filing by nearly 2 months, and it references altering financial instruments and anticipating your husband's reaction. Ellen's voice came out lower now. Ellen. I was trying to protect what we built. Judge Harmon. By excluding him from knowledge of changes to jointly held assets? No answer. The clerk shifted papers on her desk. The sound was dry and crisp, official. Brad wiped his forehead discreetly. Janet remained seated. Calm, prepared. Judge Harmon tapped the edge of his desk once. Judge Harmon. I want this email entered into the record in full. The clerk nodded. Daniel stood suddenly. Daniel. Your Honor, may I say something? The judge regarded him carefully. Judge Harmon. You may. Daniel's voice shook, but he didn't stop. Daniel. I never saw this email. Mom showed me screenshots. Just parts. Oh, she told me Dad was losing track of things. His words came quicker now. Daniel. She said we had to act before he gave money away or made mistakes. Ellen finally turned toward him. Ellen. Daniel, stop. Daniel didn't. Daniel. I thought I was helping. He looked at me again. Daniel. Dad. I didn't know. I kept my voice level. Me. I figured. Not angry, not bitter, just steady. Judge Harmon watched all of us like pieces on a board. Judge Harmon. This court will take a 10-minute recess. The gavel struck once, not loud, but final enough to echo. Ellen's smirk was gone now. In its place was something else. Not fear, exposure. The gavel struck once, not loud, but final enough to echo. Ellen's smirk was gone now. In its place was something else. Not fear, exposure. The courtroom began to move again. The chairs shifted, papers stacked. The low murmur of attorneys filled the air like distant traffic. I stayed seated for a moment. My hands rested on my folder. They weren't shaking anymore. Janet leaned close. Janet, that email changes posture. Me. Posture. Janet. From asset dispute to credibility problem. Across the aisle, Brad bent toward Ellen. His whisper was sharp now, clipped at the edges. Brad, why wasn't I told about that line? Ellen, I didn't think it mattered. Brad, everything matters in a courtroom. Daniel stood awkwardly between them. Not fully with her, not fully away. He looked smaller than he had an hour ago. The bailiff opened the side door to the hallway. Warm air drifted in from the corridor. It smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and vending machine popcorn. Judge Harmon exited without another word, but I rose slowly. My knee still protested from last year's surgery, a dull pull beneath the fabric of my suit pants. Daniel approached me before I reached the aisle. He stopped a few feet away. Not too close. Daniel. Dad. I swear, I didn't know about that part. His voice wasn't defensive. It was cracked down the middle. I studied his face, the same freckle near his left eyebrow, the same crease at the bridge of his nose when he worried. Me. I know you didn't. He exhaled hard, like he'd been holding something heavy. Daniel. She told me you were forgetting bills, that you almost wired money to the wrong account. Me. I asked the bank to verify routing numbers. Daniel blinked. Daniel. She said you were confused. I felt something tighten in my chest, not rage, not even betrayal, and just the realization that confusion can be manufactured. Stability, Brad had called it. Daniel rubbed his palms together. He looked toward the hallway where Ellen stood speaking urgently into her phone. Daniel, why would she write that? Me. Because she thought it would work. He stared at the floor tiles. Gray squares. Perfectly aligned. A man passed us holding a Walmart bag stuffed with legal papers. Ordinary life brushing against collapse. Janet joined us. Janet. Daniel, your testimony matters. So does clarity. Daniel nodded slowly. Janet. When we return, the judge may ask you more about what you were shown. Daniel. I'll tell the truth. That word sounded different now. Truth doesn't shout. It stands. Ellen ended her call and approached. Her heels clicked faster this time. Ellen. Daniel. Oh, come here. He didn't move. Ellen's eyes flicked toward me. There was no smirk left. Only calculation trying to rebuild itself. Ellen. Raymond, don't twist this. I was protecting our future. Me. By planning it without me? She inhaled sharply. Ellen. You've been distant for years. Me. Distant isn't incompetent. Her jaw tightened. The pearls at her throat shifted when she swallowed. Brad stepped between us. Brad. Let's keep hallway conversations minimal. Janet. Agreed. The bailiff's voice echoed from the doorway. Bailiff. Court resumes. We filed back in. The fluorescent lights felt brighter now, less forgiving. Judge Harmon returned, expression unreadable. Everyone stood, then sat. The clerk handed him a printed copy of the email thread, stapled, marked, official. Judge Harmon adjusted his glasses again. "Hey, Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, I've reviewed the full exchange." He looked directly at her. "Judge Harmon, you referenced securing the house before your husband understood the numbers. Clarify." Ellen straightened. "Ellen, I meant we needed clarity before decisions were finalized." Judge Harmon, "That is not what the language suggests." Brad attempted to steer. "Brad, Your Honor, emotional phrasing during marital breakdown." Judge Harmon cut him off. "Judge Harmon, Mr. Klein, the phrasing references strategic timing." Silence followed. Not theatrical, just heavy. Judge Harmon turned to Daniel. "Judge Harmon, Mr. Whitaker, were you aware your mother intended to alter beneficiary designations and property interests prior to filing?" Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. "Daniel, no." Judge Harmon, did you agree your father was mentally incapable of managing finances? Daniel's voice was steadier now. "Daniel, no, sir. I agreed he'd been recovering from surgery." The difference was small, but decisive. Judge Harmon nodded. "Judge Harmon, the court takes allegations of diminished capacity seriously." He paused, then looked at me. "Judge Harmon, Mr. Whitaker, have you been evaluated by a physician regarding cognitive decline?" Me. "No, Your Honor. My primary care physician cleared me post-surgery. I have documentation." Janet slid a folder forward. Janet. Medical clearance dated January 14th, 2026. The clerk marked it. Judge Harmon reviewed briefly. Judge Harmon. Very well. He folded his hands on the bench. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker. And this email implies anticipation of your husband's lack of awareness. Ellen's voice dropped. Ellen. I was frustrated. Judge Harmon. Frustration does not authorize preemptive asset control. Brad shifted again. His confidence was thinning. Judge Harmon continued. Judge Harmon. Furthermore, coaching a witness based on selective communications raises concerns. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. Ellen looked at him then. Really looked. He didn't look back. The judge's tone changed. Subtle, but firm. Judge Harmon. I am not making a final determination today. However, this court will require a full forensic accounting of all transactions made in the 90 days preceding the petition. Brad opened his mouth. Judge Harmon raised a finger. Judge Harmon. Additionally, as any beneficiary changes executed without mutual acknowledgement will be reviewed for validity. Ellen's composure cracked. Not loudly. Just a small fracture around the eyes. She had expected momentum. Instead, she had scrutiny. Daniel shifted in his seat and looked at me again. This time there was no distance, just recognition, a quiet understanding settling between us. The judge stacked the papers neatly. Judge Harmon, we will proceed with further testimony after clarification of these communications. He lifted the printed email slightly. Judge Harmon. This document changes the trajectory of this case. And for the first time that morning, I believed him. And for the first that morning, I believed him. Judge Harmon set the email down like it weighed more than paper, while the clerk slid a fresh exhibit sticker across the table. Brad's pen moved fast, but his hand wasn't steady anymore. Behind us, the gallery had filled. 2 women in nurse scrubs, a man in a Carhartt jacket, a young couple whispering over custody forms. They were strangers, but they leaned in the same way people do at a slow-motion crash. I felt their attention as a pressure on my shoulders. Not loud, just present. Ellen sat rigid, eyes forward, as if staring could erase what had been read. Her attorney kept shifting his binder, opening it, closing it. A pointless ritual. Daniel's chair was close enough that I could hear his breathing. Short pulls of air, long releases, like he was trying to keep himself from saying something that might split the room in half. Judge Harmon looked at him again. Judge Harmon. Mr. Whitaker, the court needs to understand what you relied on. Daniel's hands unclenched, then clenched again. Daniel. I relied on what my mom showed me. Brad stood. Brad. Your Honor, we've already established. Judge Harmon. Sit down, Mr. Klein. I'm establishing it clearly. Janet didn't look at Brad. She looked at Daniel, the way a teacher looks at a student right before a hard question. Janet. Daniel. Were you ever shown your mother's full emails? Daniel. No. Janet. Were you shown your father's full replies? Daniel hesitated. Daniel. Not really. I saw pieces. Ellen turned her head a fraction. Not toward me, toward Daniel. Ellen, because you were upset, honey. I was simplifying. Her voice had the softness she used on him when he was 10. It didn't belong in this room. Daniel's throat worked as he swallowed. Well, Daniel, you told me Dad was hiding money. Ellen, I told you I was worried. Daniel, you told me he wasn't reading anything he signed. The words hit her like cold water. Her chin lifted, but her eyes narrowed. Ellen, he wasn't. He was tired. Daniel, tired isn't the same as unaware. I kept my gaze on the judge's bench. If I looked at my son too long, I'd break the calm I'd built. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, did you forward communications to your son? Ellen. I shared what affected him. Judge Harmon. Did you forward this email? Ellen's lips pressed together. Ellen. No. Judge Harmon. Why not? Ellen. Because it was between counsel. Judge Harmon. It was between counsel and a plan. Brad started to speak again, but Janet was already on her feet. Janet. Your Honor. May I approach with an exhibit related to what Daniel received? Judge Harmon. You may. Janet walked to the clerk with a single-page printout. At the top was a Gmail header and a thread title. Below it, 3 cropped screenshots, each with the same jagged edge. Cutouts, like someone had used scissors on a story. Janet returned to her seat. Janet. Daniel, is this what your mother showed you? Daniel leaned forward. His shoulders slumped as he read. Daniel. Yes, that looks like it. Janet. Read the highlighted line aloud. Daniel's voice came out dry. Daniel. I don't want Ellen on my accounts anymore. Ellen's eyes flashed. Ellen. Because you said that. Me. I said it after you moved money without asking. Janet lifted a finger, calm. Janet. Daniel, did you see the sentence that follows that line? Daniel blinked. Oh, Daniel. No, Janet. Your Honor, the next sentence is in the full email. It wasn't shown to him. She handed a larger printout to the clerk. The clerk passed it to the judge. Judge Harmon read silently for a moment. Judge Harmon. The full sentence reads, I don't want Ellen on my accounts anymore because she transferred funds without my consent. Ellen's shoulders tightened. Brad's face stiffened, like he'd just realized the ground was softer than he thought. Daniel stared at the screen, then at Ellen. Daniel, you cut it. Ellen, I didn't cut anything. I summarized. Daniel, you cut the reason. He looked down at his hands, palms open now. His wedding ring glinted under the lights. A man with his own vows, realizing how easily vows can be twisted. Oh, Daniel, you told me Dad was turning on you for no reason. Ellen, he was turning on me. Daniel, because you did something first. Ellen's perfume seemed stronger as she shifted in her chair, like the scent was trying to defend her. It didn't. Judge Harmon spoke, measured. Judge Harmon. Daniel, did your mother advise you on what to say today? Daniel didn't answer right away. He glanced at Brad, then at Ellen. Ellen. Daniel, don't get pulled into legal wording. Just tell them you love your mother. Daniel's jaw tightened. Daniel. She told me to say Dad was confused. Ellen's voice snapped sharp for the first time. Ellen. Because you saw it. Daniel. I saw recovery. I saw pain meds. I saw him limping to the mailbox. He turned toward the judge fully now. Daniel. I didn't see him lose his mind. The gallery shifted again. A cough, a shoe squeak, a baby fussing somewhere down the row. Life pressing in close around our private disaster. Judge Harmon. Daniel, were you promised anything in exchange for your testimony? Daniel's eyes widened. Daniel. No. Janet. Were you told you'd be protected? Daniel looked at Ellen, and his voice dropped. Daniel. She said the house would stay in the family. She said, it would be mine one day. Ellen's face hardened. Ellen. That's not a bribe. That's reality. Daniel. It felt like a reward for siding with you. Brad stood again. Brad. Your Honor, this is turning into family counseling. Judge Harmon. No, it's turning into evidence. He turned to Daniel. Judge Harmon. I'm going to ask you a direct question. Answer it directly. Daniel nodded once, slow. Judge Harmon. Did you take your mother's word over your father's without verifying the full record? Daniel's shoulders dropped, like a weight finally found a place to sit. Daniel. Yes, sir. That admission hit me in the ribs, not as punishment, as confirmation. Judge Harmon. Do you understand how that affects your credibility as a witness? Daniel. Yes, sir. He turned his head toward me. This time he didn't look away. Daniel. Dad. I'm sorry. I let my breath out through my nose. I didn't give him forgiveness like a gift. I gave him the only thing I had in that moment. Me. Tell it straight. Ellen's lips parted. Ellen. Raymond, don't poison him against me. Me. You already tried to use him against me. The judge glanced at the clock, then back to the email in front of him. Judge Harmon. We will continue testimony. Oh, but before we do, I want the court record corrected. He looked at Daniel. Judge Harmon. Mr. Whitaker, do you wish to amend anything you said earlier today? Daniel's hands trembled once, then steadied. Daniel. Yes, Your Honor. He swallowed. Daniel. May I clarify my prior statement to the court? Daniel. May I clarify my prior statement to the court? Judge Harmon studied him for a long second, then nodded. Judge Harmon. You may. The air felt colder than before, not because the thermostat changed, because direction had. Daniel stood straighter this time. Not defensive, not rehearsed, just deliberate. Daniel. Earlier, I testified that my father was reckless with money and not fully aware of his decisions. He paused. Daniel. That statement was based on partial information. Ellen's hand gripped the edge of the table, and her knuckles showed pale beneath her skin. Daniel continued. Daniel, I did not review full bank records. I did not read complete email threads. I relied on summaries given to me. Judge Harmon. By whom? Daniel didn't hesitate now. Daniel. By my mother. The words weren't loud, but they shifted weight in the room. Brad leaned in toward Ellen again, whispering urgently. His composure was no longer polished. It was patched. Janet remained still, hands folded. Judge Harmon. Mr. Whitaker, do you believe your father is mentally incapable of managing his finances? Daniel looked at me. He held the look. Daniel. No, sir. Ellen inhaled sharply. Ellen. Daniel. Judge Harmon's voice cut clean through hers. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, you will not coach the witness. That sentence landed harder than the gavel ever could, and I kept my eyes forward. But something inside me shifted into place. For months I'd been painted as fragile, forgetful, unsteady, a man who needed supervision. Now the narrative was cracking under its own weight. Brad tried one more angle. Brad. Your Honor, the intent here was to protect marital assets during uncertainty. Judge Harmon. Protection does not authorize concealment. He tapped the printed email again. Judge Harmon. The language is strategic. It anticipates advantage. Ellen's voice dropped into something defensive. Ellen. I was scared. He'd just had surgery. He was distracted. Janet rose slowly. Janet. Your Honor, Mr. Whitaker signed no documents authorizing beneficiary changes. No power of attorney was executed. No medical incapacity was declared. She placed another document on the clerk's tray. Janet. And no physician's report supports diminished cognition. The clerk marked it efficiently. Judge Harmon nodded. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, why did you not pursue formal evaluation if you believed your husband was incapable? Ellen's answer came too quickly. Ellen. Because I didn't want to embarrass him. Judge Harmon's gaze didn't soften. Judge Harmon. Instead, you altered financial interests quietly. Brad stepped in. Brad. Your Honor, we object to characterization. Judge Harmon. It's not characterization, it's chronology. That word carried authority, timeline, sequence, intent. Daniel lowered himself into his seat. He looked drained now, not angry, not defensive, just tired. The gallery felt closer than before. The scrape of someone's shoe, the low hum of the ventilation system, was every sound magnified by tension. Judge Harmon folded his hands again. Judge Harmon, the court is concerned about credibility. He looked at Ellen. Judge Harmon, particularly where selective disclosure influenced a witness. Ellen's composure fractured more visibly now. Her jaw tightened. Her lips thinned. Ellen, I was trying to hold this family together. I finally spoke. Me. By dismantling it quietly? She turned toward me. Ellen, you stopped listening years ago. Me. You stopped talking honestly. Janet touched my sleeve gently. A reminder. Stay controlled. Control is power. Emotion is noise. Judge Harmon leaned forward slightly. Judge Harmon. Given the emergence of this email and testimony, the court will order a temporary hold on property transfers. Brad froze. Judge Harmon continued. Judge Harmon, no further financial alterations may occur pending forensic review. He looked at Ellen directly. Judge Harmon, any attempt to circumvent that hold will be viewed severely. Ellen's face went still, not defeated, but contained. Brad whispered again. Brad, we can pivot to mediation. Ellen didn't answer him. Judge Harmon made a note on the record. Judge Harmon, the beneficiary change filed November 18th will be examined for validity, including the notary certification and procedural compliance. He glanced at Janet. Judge Harmon, Ms. Mills, submit supporting documentation regarding consent. Janet nodded. Janet, already prepared, Your Honor. Prepared. That word tasted steady. Daniel shifted again and looked at me. Daniel, Dad, I need to fix this. Me, tell the truth. Well, that's enough. Judge Harmon closed the folder slowly. Judge Harmon, we will take a short recess before proceeding to financial specifics. The gavel tapped once. Not dramatic, decisive. As the courtroom rose again, Ellen didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead. The smirk from that morning felt like it belonged to a different person. Brad gathered his papers with less confidence than before. Janet leaned close once more. Janet, momentum's shifting. Me, feels different. Janet, because it is. Daniel stepped toward me as we moved into the aisle. He didn't stand behind his mother this time. He stood beside me. That wasn't reconciliation, but it was direction, and direction matters. He stood beside me. That wasn't reconciliation, but it was direction. We stepped into the hallway outside courtroom 4B. While the carpet was worn thin in a path from years of pacing, a soda machine hummed near the wall, steady and indifferent. The air out there was warmer, heavier. It smelled like dust and burnt popcorn from the vending machine at the end of the corridor. Daniel stopped near a bulletin board filled with faded legal notices, probate hearings, name changes, small claims dockets, ordinary endings. He ran a hand through his hair. Daniel, I should have asked you first. Me. You should have asked both of us. He nodded slowly. Daniel, she told me you were slipping, that you forgot conversations. Me. Did I forget yours? Daniel looked at me, eyes red but steady. Daniel. No. A man in a Dallas Cowboys jacket brushed past us, muttering into his phone. Life continued around us without pause. Daniel lowered his voice. Now, Daniel, She said the bank called her about unusual activity. Me. The bank called me. I asked for transaction verification. Daniel blinked. Daniel. She never said that part. Silence sat between us. Not hostile. Just honest. Ellen emerged from the courtroom with Brad close behind her. Her heels clicked slower now. Measured. Calculated. She saw us standing together. Her expression tightened. Ellen. Daniel, we need to talk. He didn't move toward her. Daniel, we are talking. Brad stepped forward, trying to control the temperature. Brad, let's avoid hallway arguments. Janet appeared beside me, calm as ever. Janet, no one's arguing. Ellen's voice softened, practiced. Ellen, Daniel, honey, you don't understand how these things work. Daniel, I understand screenshots. That landed. Ellen's jaw flexed. Hush, Ellen. Your father has always been impulsive. Me. Impulsive isn't incompetent. She turned to me fully now. Ellen, you were ready to move money without telling me. Me. I was ready to remove you from accounts after you moved money without telling me. Brad inhaled sharply. Brad. Raymond, this isn't productive. Me. It wasn't productive when it started either. Janet stepped slightly between us, not to block, but to stabilize. Janet. We're back in 5 minutes. Daniel looked at his mother. Daniel. Did you think I wouldn't read the full thing eventually? Ellen's voice dropped. Ellen. I thought I was protecting you. Daniel. From what? She didn't answer. He waited. Still nothing. For the first time in his life, my son looked at his mother like she was a stranger. Not cruelly, just clearly. When a deputy walked past, keys clinking at his belt, the metallic sound echoed briefly down the hallway. Daniel spoke again, quieter now. Daniel, you said the house would stay in the family if I supported you. Ellen's eyes widened. Ellen, I said the house should stay stable. Daniel, you said it would be mine. That line hung between them. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. Brad rubbed his temples. Brad, this is spiraling, Janet replied evenly. Janet, it's clarifying. The bailiff's voice echoed from inside the courtroom. Bailiff, all parties, please return. Ellen straightened her blazer. The composure came back, but thinner. She walked ahead this time, not waiting for Daniel. He hesitated beside me. Daniel. Dad, whatever happens, I won't repeat that testimony. Me. You don't need to undo it. Just stand in it. He nodded once. We walked back in together. The courtroom felt different now. Same beige walls, same flag, but the air had shifted. Judge Harmon returned to the bench with a new folder in hand. Everyone stood, then sat. Judge Harmon looked down at the docket sheet. Judge Harmon. Before we proceed, I want to address potential witness influence. Brad's pen stopped moving. Judge Harmon continued. Judge Harmon. Mr. Whitaker's testimony indicates selective disclosure of financial communications. He looked directly at Ellen. Judge Harmon. That raises concern. Ellen held his gaze. Not defiant, not apologetic, just guarded. Judge Harmon turned to Daniel. Judge Harmon. You remain under oath. Daniel nodded. Judge Harmon. Do you affirm that your testimony correction was voluntary? Daniel. Yes. Sir? Judge Harmon. Were you pressured in any way to amend it? Daniel glanced briefly at Ellen, then back at the judge. Daniel. No, sir. Brad shifted in his seat again. Judge Harmon made a note. The scratch of his pen was slow and deliberate. Judge Harmon. The court takes coaching seriously. That word landed again. Coaching. Not guidance, not concern. Coaching. Ellen's fingers curled slightly against the table's edge. I noticed it because I knew her hands. 41 years teaches you tells. Judge Harmon leaned back. Judge Harmon. We will now proceed to examine transaction timing. Janet stood smoothly. Janet. Your Honor, we have prepared a timeline of transfers and correspondence. Brad rose too. Brad. And we have clarifications. Judge Harmon raised a hand. Judge Harmon. One at a time. The clerk dimmed the sidelights slightly as the monitor brightened again. Numbers filled the screen. Dates, amounts, transfers. October 3rd, October 12th, November 18th. Each date aligned with a sentence from that email. Planning. Anticipation. Execution. Ellen stared at the screen. Her earlier smirk felt like a distant memory now. Daniel remained seated beside me. Not behind her. Beside me. And that simple shift carried more weight than any argument. Judge Harmon tapped the bench lightly. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, these transfers align precisely with your email timeline. He paused. Judge Harmon. Explain that. Ellen opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Ellen. It's coincidence. No one in that room believed that word. Not even her. No one in that room believed that word. Not even her. The monitor glowed against the beige wall, washing the courtroom in pale light. Numbers lined up in neat columns. Dates stacked like stepping stones across a river. October 3rd. Email referencing securing the house. October 12th. $48,000 transferred from joint savings. November 18th. Beneficiary designation change. Notarized. December 2nd. Petition filed. Chronology doesn't argue. It simply sits there. Judge Harmon tapped the edge of the bench with his pen. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, the timing is not random. Ellen clasped her hands together. Her pearls pressed against her throat as she swallowed. Ellen. We were reorganizing finances. Janet stood. Janet. Your Honor, the transfer on October 12th moved funds into an account solely in Mrs. Whitaker's name. Brad interjected quickly. Brad. Marital funds, lawful access. Janet didn't raise her voice. Janet. Access is not concealment. Intent is the question. Judge Harmon nodded once. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, why was the October 12th transfer not disclosed to your husband? Ellen's response came measured. Ellen. He was recovering. I didn't want to overwhelm him. I felt the wood of the bench beneath my fingers again. Solid. Predictable. Me. You didn't mention it because I would have asked questions. Ellen's eyes flashed toward me. Ellen. You would have panicked. Me. I would have checked. Daniel shifted beside me. He was watching the screen like he was seeing a map redraw itself. Judge Harmon leaned forward slightly. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, much were you anticipating divorce proceedings at the time of these transfers? Brad rose. Brad. Objection. Speculation. Judge Harmon didn't look at him. Judge Harmon. I'm asking about her state of mind. Ellen hesitated. A fraction of a second. But in a courtroom, hesitation speaks. Ellen. We were having problems. Judge Harmon. That was not my question. Silence stretched. The hum of the lights seemed louder again. Ellen finally answered. Ellen. Yes. The word landed flat. Not dramatic, just final. Daniel exhaled slowly beside me. Judge Harmon made another note. Judge Harmon. And you did not disclose those transfers when filing the petition? Brad stepped in carefully. Brad. They were marital reallocations. Janet moved closer to the lectern. Janet. Your Honor, the petition lists assets as jointly held at time of filing. The October 12th transfer altered that status. She placed a highlighted copy on the clerk's tray. Janet. It was not amended. Judge Harmon examined the page. Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, did you amend your financial disclosure after the transfer? Ellen's voice was quieter now. Ellen. No. Judge Harmon set the document down. Judge Harmon. The court is troubled. That word carried more weight than any raised voice. Troubled. Daniel rubbed his palms against his slacks. Daniel. Mom. Why didn't you just tell him? Ellen turned sharply. Ellen. Because he never listens. Daniel. You never gave him the chance. Brad's pen stopped moving entirely. Judge Harmon shifted his focus. Judge Harmon. This matter may require forensic accounting. He paused. Well, Judge Harmon. Additionally, the beneficiary change executed November 18th will be reviewed for undue influence. Ellen stiffened. Ellen. There was no influence. Judge Harmon. The email suggests premeditation. Janet added evenly, Janet. The phrase, he won't see it coming, is not administrative language. Brad's jaw tightened. Brad. Your Honor, that is rhetorical. Judge Harmon. It is recorded. The gallery shifted again. A chair leg scraped. Someone cleared their throat. I kept my posture steady. The longer I remained calm, the more frantic she appeared. Judge Harmon looked toward Daniel once more. Judge Harmon. Mr. Whitaker, you indicated your mother assured you the house would remain in the family. Daniel nodded. Daniel. Yes, sir. Judge Harmon. Were you aware of the October 12th transfer at that time? Daniel. No. Judge Harmon. Were you aware of the beneficiary change? Daniel. No. Judge Harmon folded his hands again. Judge Harmon. That reinforces the court's concern regarding selective disclosure. Ellen's composure faltered again. Ellen. I was protecting my child. Me. By putting him in the middle? She looked at me with something raw now. Not calculation. Frustration. Ellen. You always made decisions alone. Me. This wasn't alone. It was hidden. Daniel's voice came quietly. Daniel. Mom. I would have stood with you without all this. That line hit her harder than anything the judge had said. For a moment she didn't respond. Not because she didn't have words. Because she didn't have the right ones. Judge Harmon closed the file slowly. Judge Harmon. Given the material presented today, the court will postpone ruling on property division. Brad stiffened. Judge Harmon continued. Judge Harmon. A temporary freeze on disputed assets remains in effect. He looked directly at Ellen. Judge Harmon. Further, the court will consider whether litigation conduct warrants adjustment in equitable distribution. That sentence landed like a quiet thunderclap. Adjustment, consequences, not shouted, calculated. Ellen's shoulders sank slightly. The smirk from the morning was gone completely now, not replaced by tears, replaced by realization. Daniel leaned closer to me. Daniel, what does that mean? Me. It means timing matters. Judge Harmon tapped the gavel once more. I'm Judge Harmon. Court will reconvene in 2 weeks pending forensic review. He paused, then added, Judge Harmon. Mrs. Whitaker, I suggest full transparency moving forward. Transparency. The word felt almost ironic. As the courtroom began to rise again, Ellen remained seated for a second longer than everyone else. Brad whispered urgently beside her. She didn't answer him. Daniel stood fully upright next to me, not behind her, not uncertain, beside me. And that was the first clear line drawn all day. And that was the first clear line drawn all day. The clerk began stacking exhibits into tidy piles, paper sliding against paper, dry and sharp, a sound like winter leaves being swept off a porch. Judge Harmon signed the temporary orders with a firm hand. Ink moved across the page without hesitation, and then he pushed the file toward the clerk. Judge Harmon, the court is adjourned. The bailiff opened the door, and the hallway noise flooded in. Footsteps, low voices, a distant laugh that didn't belong here. Ellen stood slowly, as if standing meant admitting something. Brad leaned close, murmuring legal options into her ear. Brad. We can negotiate. We can propose mediation. We can... Ellen. Stop. One word. Flat. Not angry. Just finished. Daniel shifted closer to me as the gallery filed out. People brushed past, avoiding eye contact like shame was contagious. A woman in scrubs whispered to her friend Scrubs. Woman. Did you hear that email? Her friend shook her head wide-eyed. Ellen heard it too. Her shoulders tightened. Public humiliation wasn't a loud moment. It was 1,000 small glances. Brad gathered his binder. Oh, but his movements weren't elegant anymore. His tabs looked less like preparation and more like decoration. Janet touched my elbow. Janet, don't say anything to her. Not here. Me. I wasn't going to. Ellen finally turned toward me. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes carried heat. Ellen, so this is what you wanted, to make me look like a villain. Me. I didn't make you write it. Daniel's face tightened at my answer. Not because it was harsh, because it was true. Ellen looked at him then, searching for the loyalty she'd relied on for months. Ellen. Daniel, come with me. We need to talk privately. Daniel didn't move. He glanced at me first, like he was asking permission in a way grown men hate. Me. Go ahead. Say what you need to say. Daniel's voice came steady. Daniel, I'll talk, but I'm not going to be used again. Ellen's mouth tightened. Ellen. Used? Daniel, you didn't give me the whole story. Brad stepped in again, voice smooth but desperate. Brad. Mrs. Whitaker, let's regroup. We'll address communications. Ellen. Communications. She repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Ellen. You mean lies that got caught? Brad blinked. He didn't expect that from her. Ellen's control was slipping in public now. Not screaming, just cracking. A courthouse deputy walked past, keys clinking softly. The metal sound followed him down the hall like a reminder. This place runs on records. Daniel turned toward me. Daniel. Dad, I lifted a hand slightly. Me. Not here. He nodded. We stepped away from the courtroom door toward a side bench in the hallway. The vinyl seat was cool against the back of my legs when I sat. The courthouse had that specific smell of old carpet and copier toner. It always will. Places like this don't change. Ellen stayed near the doorway with Brad, but she was watching us. I could feel it. Daniel sat beside me. He looked straight ahead. Daniel, I thought I was defending her. Me. You were defending the version she handed you. He swallowed. Daniel, she told me you were going to sell the house. Me. I wanted to refinance, to pay off the medical bills and keep it. Daniel's eyes widened. Daniel, she said you were trying to cash out and leave her with nothing. I exhaled slowly through my nose. Me. Your mother knows how to pick the words that scare people. Daniel nodded, jaw tight. Daniel, I feel stupid. Me. You feel loyal. Well, that's different. He looked at me then, searching. Daniel, can you ever forgive me? I held the question for a beat. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a process with paperwork. Me. We'll rebuild, if you keep telling it straight. Daniel's eyes shone, but he didn't let tears fall. He was too old now to cry easily in public. Ellen suddenly approached, heels clicking again, but the rhythm had changed. Not confident, sharp. She stopped in front of Daniel. Ellen, Daniel, you're coming with me. Daniel stayed seated. Daniel, no. Ellen, excuse me? Daniel, no, Mom, not like that. Ellen's face tightened as if she'd been slapped. Ellen, after everything I've done for you, Daniel, you don't get to buy me with the house. That line cut clean. Ellen's eyes flashed toward me. Miss Ellen, you turned him against me. Me, you turned him into a witness. She stared at me, breathing shallowly. Ellen, you always needed to be right. Me, I needed to be respected. Her lips pressed tight. For a moment she looked like she might say something honest. Instead, she turned away from Daniel and addressed me again. Ellen, you think you won today? Me, no. I rose slowly. My knee pulled, but I didn't show it. Me, today you got seen. Ellen's eyes narrowed. Ellen, this isn't over. Janet appeared at my side like a shadow with a law degree. Janet, no, it's not. Ellen looked at Daniel one more time. She was searching for that old reflex of obedience. He didn't give it. She turned and walked down the hall with Brad trailing. Her heels clicked, then faded. Daniel sat still for a second, then stood with me. We walked toward the elevator. A framed poster by the doors read, "All court records are public documents." I stopped in front of it. I stared at the words like they were a hymn. Then I reached into my pocket. My wedding ring sat heavy against my skin. I slid it off slowly, feeling the pale band of skin beneath. The ring was warm from my hand, but the air around it felt cold. Daniel watched. He didn't say a word. I held the ring in my palm for a moment, not as a symbol, as a decision. Then the elevator dinged, the doors opened, and we stepped forward. The doors opened, and we stepped forward. The elevator smelled faintly of metal and old cleaning solution. A scuffed mirror covered the back wall, reflecting two men who looked related but altered. Daniel stood beside me, shoulders squared. Not a boy, not a witness, but just my son. The ring sat heavy in my palm as the doors slid shut. For 41 years, I wore it without thinking. Now I felt its full weight. Daniel glanced at my hand. Daniel, are you sure? I didn't answer immediately. Some decisions don't need commentary. They need quiet. Me. I'm sure of clarity. The elevator descended slowly, each floor marked by a soft mechanical click. Daniel shifted. Daniel. I keep replaying what she said. The house staying in the family. Me. That house was built on 2 incomes. Daniel nodded. Me. Not leverage. The doors opened into the lobby. Sunlight spilled through tall courthouse windows, warm and sharp. The smell of outside air drifted in each time the front doors opened. Exhaust fumes, cold pavement, distant food trucks. It felt different from the courtroom, less suffocating. Janet caught up with us near the exit. Janet, the temporary freeze gives us time. Me. Time is fine. Janet. Forensic review will speak louder than arguments. Daniel looked between us. Daniel. What happens if the judge thinks she acted in bad faith? Janet answered calmly. Janet. Equitable distribution can adjust. She let that sit. Janet. Courts don't reward deception. Daniel absorbed that quietly. We stepped outside. The wind hit my face, cool and honest. Cars moved steadily along the street. Life continued, unaware of court transcripts. Across the sidewalk, Ellen stood beside Brad near her car. She wasn't crying. She wasn't raging. She was thinking. Brad spoke quickly, gesturing with a legal pad. Ellen's posture had changed. Not defeated. Contained. She noticed us and walked halfway across the sidewalk. Miss Brad hesitated but followed. Ellen stopped a few feet away. Ellen. Raymond. Her voice carried less certainty now. Not weakness. Just recalibration. Me. Ellen. Daniel remained beside me, silent. Ellen's eyes flicked to my bare hand. She saw the missing ring. She understood. Ellen. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Me. No, I'm making it honest. Brad cleared his throat softly. Brad. Mrs. Whitaker, perhaps we should discuss strategy in private. Ellen ignored him. Ellen. You could have handled this quietly. Me. I tried. She held my gaze. For a moment I saw something real behind her frustration. Fear. Not of losing money. Of losing control. Ellen. You embarrassed me. Me. You wrote it. Daniel finally spoke. Daniel. Mom. It didn't have to be like that. She looked at him as if searching for sympathy. Daniel didn't move toward her. He didn't step away either. He simply stood. That was the difference now. Ellen's shoulders lowered a fraction. Ellen. I thought I was securing things. Me. You were securing advantage. Brad stepped forward gently. Brad. We should prepare for mediation. Ellen exhaled through her nose. The fight had drained. Not the case, the narrative. She looked at me one last time. Ellen. You think you're vindicated? Me. No. I let the words land slow. Me. I think the record is. She didn't respond. She turned and walked back toward her car. Brad followed, phone already pressed to his ear. Daniel and I stood in the sunlight a moment longer. Cars passed. A siren wailed faintly in the distance. Yet the world kept moving. Daniel spoke quietly. Daniel, I should have called you months ago. Me. You're calling now. He nodded. Daniel, what do you want to do about the house? I looked down the street toward the modest brick place we'd bought in 1987. The yard where he learned to ride a bike. The kitchen table where we celebrated prom night and argued about curfews. Memory doesn't determine ownership. Me. We'll let the court decide what's fair. Daniel. And if it splits? Me. Then we split it clean. He studied me. Daniel, you're not angry. I considered that. Anger is loud. Clarity is quiet. Me. I was angry before today. He waited. Me. Now I'm aware. He gave a small nod. Daniel, I'll review the full financials with you, every line. Me. Good. He extended his hand. Not as a child, as a man. I took it, and his grip was firm. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was being pushed out of my own story. I felt present in it. The courthouse doors opened behind us again. More cases, more families, more paper trails. Truth doesn't rush. It waits. It sits in inboxes. It lives in timestamps. It surfaces when someone finally reads the whole thread. She thought I was the one being judged that day. Turns out, it was her character on trial. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.